an anti-nuclear activist, and supports a foreign policy of military non-interventionism, along with a unilateral policy of nuclear challenge. Jeremy Corbyn was elected the leader of our party, the Labour Party, 12th of September 2015, with a landslide vote of 59.5% in the first round of the ballot. Right. I was delighted to nominate Jeremy to our CLP meeting and to gain the support of the CLP members in Scarborough and Whitley. I give you Jeremy Corbyn, MP, leader of our and with everyone's help, the next Labour Prime Minister.
Good evening all. Thanks very much for giving me a few moments tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't be here at 7:30. It's been a slightly complicated day. I had to be in Sheffield this morning, Trafalgar Square this afternoon, and with you this evening. Because the obvious thing would have been to got the train from Sheffield to Doncaster and come up here. But I thought it would be much more fun to go through London. I just like trains. Is that okay? And so I had the Yorkshire and Humberside Regional Conference of the party this morning, and then the CND rally this afternoon about Trident. And I thought it was quite important to put down a point that I was elected on a 10-point manifesto, one of which was that I would oppose the replacement of Trident, and I would launch a party consultation document on how that could be brought about. And I thought it was only right and proper that I should go and share that with a few thousand people in Trafalgar Square. That's one does, and so I'm sorry I couldn't be here a bit earlier. And tomorrow we've got the Young Labour Conference, and I've spoken at all of the regional conferences as well as the Scottish and Welsh Conference ever since I was elected, and I do a lot of campaigning work all around the country. And I tell you what's exciting about it is that every single one of our regional conferences, as well as the Scottish and Welsh conferences, are the biggest they've been for years, and the Young Labour Conference that's here this weekend, and I'll be speaking there tomorrow morning, is limited by size because of the venue, but it's absolutely ram-packed because we've got such a huge increase in party membership ever since the general election. Our party membership is now nearly 400,000, larger than all the other political parties put together. That's something we can all be very proud of. I'm very clear that people have joined our party for a reason. They've joined because they're fed up with a society based on the most grotesque levels of inequality imaginable. The gap between the executive pay and the workers' pay is now 183 times. That might sound a bit of a wild statistic to you. What it means is the average pay of a worker, you have to multiply by 183 to get the chief executive pay of any of the FTSE top 100 companies. That is grotesque by any stretch of the imagination. You all live and work and travel around. You all see people sleeping on the streets. You all see people begging. You all know young people growing up in grossly overcrowded accommodation. You all know children that are underachieving in school because they're getting sick because they haven't got enough space in their home. You know all of these things. Is it right? Is it necessary? No. Should it be in modern Britain, one of the richest countries in the world, that this level of inequality should not only be here now, but getting worse? And the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, has decided, apparently in 2010, everything was going to be sorted out by 2015. And he spent 5 years blaming the previous Labour government. Well, I've got a slight bit of news for George Osborne. It was not nurses, it was not bakers, it was not school workers, it was not any ordinary worker or person in this country that caused the financial crash. It was unregulated banks and a crash on Wall Street and other places. And it's the working class of Britain and all over Europe, indeed the rest of the world, that are paying for that crisis. He claimed it would all be done in 5 years of austerity. 5 years later, the debts are mounting, the debts are getting worse, the deficit is getting worse, and he's now told us it's going to be another 6 years. He then decides he's apparently made some big mistakes, and so bizarrely flies off to Beijing and announces that from a hotel room last night in Beijing that there's yet another bigger round of austerity on the way. Who's going to pay for that austerity? Is it going to be the chief executives of all these companies, or is it going to be, once again, those people that rely on adult social care, young people that need youth workers, all those people that need support from public services within our society? You and I all know the answer to that. And so when I put my name forward, I was asked to put my name forward for the leadership of the Labour Party, I did so on the absolute specific point of view that we would be offering a completely different economic strategy for the Labour Party and the Labour movement of this country from day one of our leadership. And I'm delighted with the work that John McDonnell has done as Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, the way that he's challenged the austerity that Osborne and Cameron are putting forward, and the way that he's proposing an expanding economy that works for all, not for the few. That surely has to be. I was, before I became an MP, a union organiser in the National Union of Public Employees. And as a union, we represented school meals workers, hospital cleaners, many manual grades in every area of local government, water, higher education, and the health service. And we're very proud of what we achieved. We're very proud of the way that we forced both the TUC and the Labour Party to accept the principle that there had to be a national minimum wage. It was quite an important battle to win, to say that there could be a statutory minimum wage, as well as using the strength of collective bargaining to enhance it. And we did get that, and I was delighted when we finally voted that through Parliament. But we never saw the minimum wage as the be-all and end-all of all struggles. It was a floor. It was a base from which we had to build. And I have strongly supported the campaign with Bakers Union for the £10 per hour minimum wage. I put that in the electoral statements that we put forward in the leadership campaign, and I've made that very clear ever since. And I've been inspired by the $15 an hour campaign in the United States. And I was just talking to Ian before we came in to this meeting this evening about the struggles generations go through. Our forefathers and mothers before us, they campaigned for workers' rights, they campaigned to set up unions in the mines, in the factories, in the car industry, and so many industries, those heroic struggles. And from that grew a whole labour movement culture, the culture that you grew up standing up for each other. You grew up in a community standing up for each other. You went to work, you joined the union, and you supported each other during that. Then along came the notions of Reaganomics and Thatcher in the 70s particularly, which essentially appealed to individualism and greed. Nothing collective about it. It didn't matter how much money you made, providing you made it at the expense of somebody else. There were no limits, there were no controls on what you did. And so that whole atmosphere of greed came about. That greed destroyed the coal mines, destroyed the steel industry largely, and many, many other industries within our society, and privatised large numbers of services. You look at those places now, BT and many others that have been privatised by that government. But it also left a cultural legacy of individualism at the expense of other people. And so the struggles that we are now having to organise people in the fast food industry on both sides of the Atlantic are actually a reliving of all the original struggles. It's a cultural issue as well, about people working together to gain decency, to gain fair wages, and to gain security and employment. And so the demands of a basic wage of $15 an hour in the USA have met with a huge resonance from large numbers of people in the USA who've supported them. I've seen them do it when I was in New York in May. I went there for UN, for non-proliferation treaty negotiations. And you can see that level of support and the popularity of those struggles that's there. You can see it in the way in which Bernie Sanders has managed to transform the debate in the Democratic primaries, again, around the whole issue of poverty, injustice, and inequality. So everything that we're doing here in the fast food campaign is about recruiting people to the union, is about the kind of society that we want to live in. And so I think the campaign is brilliant, and I'm really pleased that the 14th of April there's going to be this global day. Because you think about it, we campaign to gain political office within a national jurisdiction. We try to get people elected as MPs, we try to get people elected as European MPs, we try to get people elected local authorities and all the other elected positions. That, of course, is all very important. The global corporations pay only half an eye to that. McDonald's are a global corporation in all parts of the world. Starbucks are a global corporation. Google is a global corporation. And you add them all up, and then you see the way they play ducks and drakes with national governments, shifting profits around, shifting head offices around in order to reduce their tax liability all over the place. We've got to think as internationally as they think in our campaign for decent wages across the whole. So this 14th day of global action is a very important one, and I'm just trying to work out the best ways that we can support that campaign, the best ways we can give it as much leverage as possible. But also to say to particularly young workers, many of whom are also students, faced with massive debts while they're in college or university, or 0 hours contracts, or people that have been sanctioned because they've had some often minor misdemeanor with the DWP, young workers going through a very difficult time. We need to get them in the unions. We need to encourage them to understand they don't have to suffer alone and always fight alone. So our trade union movement is changing, and I think in many ways it's a very good thing. It's changing into being as much a social and community organisation as a totally industrial organisation, because people need that sense of community and support. Look at the mining areas during the heyday of the mining industry. The centre of the community was the miners' welfare. It was that sense of community that it brought it about. I think it's recreating that sense of community, albeit in a different way. Some of it's online. There's lots of ways you do it, but you've got to create that sense of support and solidarity. So a campaign to eliminate the appalling way in which 0 hours contracts operate. The idea that you sign a contract with an employer with no guarantee of any earnings whatsoever. You might earn a bit one week with a lot of hours, you might get none the next week. How on earth can you plan your life around that? How can you support children around that? How can you pay your rent around that? And then the employers want us to have a workplace benefit system that subsidises low wages. Don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to working tax credits, absolutely not. I've defended them and will continue to defend them. But I want, as well as that, to have a much higher basic wage, a real living wage, so that we as a whole don't end up subsidising low wages. These issues are very important. And when we're together, what do we campaign about as well? We campaign for an economy that works for all, that invests rather than over profits, that encourages high-tech investments and all the things that we want, and the green economy that we want in the future, but also one that absolutely treats workers decently and fairly, hence the campaign on the basic wage, hence the campaign on minimum hours contracts. Now, the union won the campaign at Hovis, and that was a fantastic victory. Well done, Bakers Union. And winning that, they showed what can be achieved. And in winning that, it gave everybody a huge fill-up. So this campaign is about all the things that I've mentioned, but it's also about the nature of the kind of society we want to live in. I want to see a society where we have a National Health Service, publicly owned, publicly run, with all the staff employed by the public. Not one that's been diced up, divided up and sold off to one private health operator after another. That's why the battle that junior doctors are having at the moment is a very important one, and we should all get behind them in the battle. And the question of education. You might call me terribly old-fashioned, but I believe that education is a right for all. It's not a commodity to be marketed. It's a right for all. That means obviously defending schools and what goes with that, but also defending adult education so that you can return to education and learning whenever you wish to. It's good for the individual, it's good for all of us, but also not saddling students with the massive debts that they are saddled with often at the end of their courses. Because it seems to me that we should be helping people to get through education, not penalising them for doing it. And let's finish on the last point, which is really the points about health and community. Since I was elected the leader of the party, I've obviously faced lots of support from the national media, as you probably noticed. I'm overwhelmed with the kindness that they show. And sometimes, apparently, some of them say some quite unpleasant things, which is very sad for them. But I look at things this way. If somebody is throwing abuse around, then maybe it's because they've got nothing else to throw around. Yeah. Therefore, I don't respond to any of that because I want the whole thing to be political. I want the whole thing to be a serious political debate. But I also want us, as a movement, to be strong enough, to be proud enough to say that we do care for all. Hence, I feel very passionately about the issues of mental health that face our society. 1 in 4 of us in our lifetime are going to go through some kind of crisis, depression, all kinds of things. And it can be very bad. We all know people that have been in those bad places. We shouldn't allow people to make a career as comedians, belittling people that are going through a mental health crisis. We shouldn't allow a macho culture to prevent young people in school and college ever talking to each other about the crisis they're going through, because it often leads people in some very terrible places and some very terrible things happen as a result of that. People suffer stress for lots of reasons. For poverty, for bad housing, for work, for bullying, all kinds of things. As a movement, we care. We care about the wages, we care about the conditions, we care about the housing. We have to also care about each other, which is why I was very keen to appoint somebody at shadow cabinet level as a cabinet level minister responsible solely for the mental health issues and mental health campaign, to show that we take this seriously as an indication of the values of the Labour movement, the values that everybody matters, the value that everything matters. And as we go about it, we need to look a bit more at the way our young people learn about their history, their past and their movement in school. How do we get the National Health Service? I was knocking up in one election and I got this family that I got there at 9:30, 10 o'clock vote. I said, "You're going to vote?" They said, "Oh yeah, Mr. Corbyn, yeah, we'll go along later." I said, "Well, there's not a lot of time to go along later. In fact, it's only half an hour." Okay. And so one of them agreed to go and sort of set off to the polling station. And these 3 late teenage lads were sitting there stretched out in front of the telly, and they said, "Why should we bother?" Right, okay. So I said, okay, I was thinking I've got 24 minutes to go to the polling station. So I was absolutely determined to get them there to vote. So I said, "Do you ever get ill?" They said, "Yeah, of course you do." Okay. "Does the doctor help you?" "Yeah, of course he does." Okay. "Who pays for the doctors?" "Don't know." Okay. Let me tell you about the National Health Service. Let me tell you how people with vision said health should not be a commodity that you bought or sold. It should be one that's provided for the good of all. So we went into this short history lesson about the development of the National Health Service. And I said, it's those principles that we adhere to and we support. I think you agree with us. Would you like to walk down to the polling station with me? And they did, and they voted. The reason I say that is the rights we've got, the right to vote, the right women got to vote, the right to universal education, the right to healthcare, the right to all those things were never given on a plate by the wealthy and the powerful. They were won. Our liberties were won by people. And there are many around the world who are campaigning for exactly those same rights and those same liberties now. And so I salute those in Bahrain or Yemen or Saudi Arabia that are standing up for their human rights just as much as we salute those in this country that are campaigning to end 0 hours contracts and give people decency at work and real human rights in their society. So let's get together for the 14th of April. Make this a global day that matters. Make this a day that is one of inspiration all around the world, as saying it doesn't have to be like this. The global corporations don't have to go on making their zillions off the backs of those that are underpaid and working really hard. It can be different. It can be different if we work together rather than compete with each other to let them win. Thank you very much.
You get fast food workers down the front, real fast food workers, by the way. Real fast food workers. I know there's a couple as well. There's somewhere in the back. Would you want to have your photograph taken with Jeremy?